All right, hello everyone. Today is the day. Amazing Spider-Man number 75 releases, and Andy and I am here with our friend and excellent artist, Alex Ogle,
Hey,
who has done the variant cover that you see before you. And he's been kind enough, after all the bugging Andy and I have done, to get him on the show today to talk about the cover.
that's right. I'm finally here.
Yes. Okay, so the first question I have for you is, what was your idea behind this particular piece?
All right. When I first started it, it was a piece for the licensing department of Marvel. So when they asked me to draw it, it was, hey, we need certain images of Spider-Man. So I was like, okay, I can draw a shot of Spider-Man in general. So I put him in a city, which is pretty normal with Spider-Man. But I gave them 6 different illustrations that I sketched out, and then they chose this one and a couple others. And so I started illustrating this one. Uh, he's really tough to get, a certain pose that's
Mm-hmm.
interesting and things. There's so many like Spider-Man where he's jumping really weird and he's really bent up and they typically do some really extreme shots, like when you see like on the licensing side on the toys and everything, you see like very animated pieces and stuff. I kind of tend to go more of the traditional comic book route where he's a little more subdued, not quite as bent up, and so here I have him kind of the typical bent leg, kind of jumping up, but he's got the webbing coming out from one arm he's swinging on and everything. So
And
yeah,
it's true that when you do this, you don't know where it's going to end up when you do it for the licensing department. It could
yeah,
go on T-shirts, could
yeah,
go on
yeah.
packaging,
They gave
anywhere
me a
really.
certain like costume reference and
Hmm.
everything, and this was ultimately done quite a while back when Spider-Man: Homecoming was coming out as a
Hmm.
movie. So
Mm.
so some of the costuming and everything is similar to that. But yeah, when I did it, I sketched the buildings at an angle so that they're kind of creating some interest too. It's not so straight up and down. I wanted it to feel like maybe the camera is ajar as he's flying through the air and everything. So yeah.
And so you work primarily digitally.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Did
what this
you
piece is completely done digital. Yeah.
did you do rough sketches for it first,
I
or?
did. I did rough sketches, but they were done digitally in Sketchbook Pro.
Hmm.
And,
Even rough sketches these days done digitally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little easier to like in Photoshop you burn and dodge some pieces, and when you do pencil work and stuff, so that you can just kind of create more contrast and adjust things and still move things around. So drawing selections and moving around even your sketch layers and stuff was pretty handy. And resizing, like I drew his head a little small, like I wanted him to feel a little more animated, so his head's a little bigger and his feet a little bigger. So I adjusted those when I was doing the sketching process digitally.
Hmm. So you did this for the licensing department years back,
Mm-hmm.
and then just out of the blue, they came to you. Like, how did it? How did Marvel approach you about it becoming a cover?
Yeah, they contacted me and said, "Oh, sometimes we use things in the licensing department on covers, and it goes both ways. Sometimes the licensing department will use covers on like merchandise, like
Hmm.
shirts and posters and everything like that. That we've seen a lot, but I didn't really know it would go the other direction that often. So that was pretty interesting. But yeah, they contacted me, wanted to use it as a cover. I was excited. They said number 75. I didn't know what was 75 meant yet because we didn't know the storyline or anything
Hmm.
that was going to happen. So it was really neat to finally get a piece that actually gets my name like credited on it,
Hmm.
because in the comic book world we give the names of all the artists that work and creators, like they're in every book practically. They're like they hype them heavily. In the license department your name is really removed, like you're not credited for doing
Hmm.
a
Mm.
piece like a t-shirt or anything. If you ever notice, there's no signatures by the artists or anything like that.
I have an Alex Ogle T-shirt
Yeah,
on right
yeah.
now.
And this one's a DC one, and yes, they took my signature off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the way it works. It's like that's part of it. When you know it's going to have to go through multiple hands, that they can't keep an artist's signature on it. It's kind of strange. But
Yeah, I think that's interesting. A lot of people don't realize is like when you see wrapping paper that has the Avengers on it, that's an artist
yeah,
who
yeah,
did that piece and everything,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and
And
it,
it's funny because a lot of the artists, they call us style guide artists, which is kind of a weird term because that in design, style guide is usually a guide for your brand.
yeah.
But they use it. They use that term just kind of as a licensing type of term, so that you make a bunch of art that goes in a package that they give out to licensees, and then they use them on different things like wrapping paper and
Hmm.
whatnot. And so a lot of us that do that work, we kind of know each other, and some of the more famous like comic book cover artists and everything, uh, they're part of that group as well, and we
Yeah,
kind of talk.
Well, I think you've done the thing that pretty much anybody who gets in the comics as an artist would be super proud to say, I one of the covers of Amazing Spider-Man, and I mean this is a pretty important issue too,
Yeah.
is your cover. So that is awesome. You came when you got here today, you were like excited. You said it was
Oh,
like
yeah.
your birthday.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, being the first piece that's credited to me and my first Marvel piece, that's a big deal to me. And it's Spider-Man's always been one of my favorite characters, so it's really fun.
Yeah, so talking about being a style guide artist, you've actually done work with like MCU properties too.
Oh yeah, yeah. A lot of the movies and TV that they did on Netflix and stuff,
Hmm.
I've done work for. Of course, that stuff I did posters and lunchbox art and all sorts of stuff that you'd never like know as me unless you just know my style. But
Yeah, I know one of them was funny. Or I was out at a store and I found artwork, and I was like, "That looks like Alex's artwork on that T-shirt." And I
Yeah.
sent you a picture. I was like, "Did you do this?" And you're like, "Yeah, where is that?"
yeah,
It was
yeah. They
like
don't really tell you
a
where
Guardians of
things
the
appear,
Galaxy
right?
shirt.
So things just kind of go out in the world, and then suddenly they're on things, and
Yeah.
so you can get excited. And I always look like I'm always digging around. I'm like going through the Disney store, and I go, "Oh, there's my Spider-Man on a kid's T-shirt on the Disney store," and things like I'm always like looking around on Google now and searching just to see if anything pops up.
Go up to the kid. Did you pay me for that? Give me
Yeah,
my
yeah.
licensing
No, I've
fee.
been at conventions and people walk by with my shirts on. I'm like, "Hey, I drew that shirt," and then they come over and we have a conversation and stuff. It's fun.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So, what are some other past comic-related projects you've done?
Well, I've done a lot with my own Kickstarter projects where I've wrote and illustrated my own books, and then I've done stuff with Action Lab on Hero Cats. I did a whole series called Midnight Over Stellar City, and so that
We have
was
sold a ton of that.
yeah, yeah. It's fun, all ages book. It's kind of like Batman Cat, so it's a very popular theme. So it's kind of fun. I enjoy that one.
Yeah, even going back to this isn't your first work on a Spider-Man property, though. Back when many years ago, you did some box art for some of the action figures.
Yeah, yeah, I did that, and that was my very first Spider-Man work. Of course, that's uncredited as well, but I still see the figures. Like
Yeah.
I go to stores, I'm like, hey, there's an old figure. That's my artwork on the back and the front, and that's kind of fun. I carry those around with me now and show those off with the cover and everything too.
Yeah, and it's funny. So back to the MCU stuff. Alex shops with us, so we get to see him every week or two. I remember you coming in and being like, "I'm doing something with Eternals, but I can't say anything."
Yeah, yeah, and
Having all that insider information, driving us crazy.
It's really neat when because you get given like samples of like you have to know the costume if you're going to draw it and that kind of thing. And so they gave me on Eternals, they gave me a lot of different things. Like I had samples of like characters running and throwing powers and like all sorts of stuff like that. Like early on 3D models of different characters and things, and like different renderings that weren't public or not at all, and set photos of actors and everything. It's really neat to kind of be behind the scenes, and then you do an illustration out of that, which has very little of those elements in there, but anything is like usable, like pieces of the way the costume bends or the looks and twists and stuff. And so it's all really handy, but it's really neat to have that insider kind of view of these movies that you're a fan of.
All right, so I think Megan might have said this to me the other day. I think she was talking about how you got to see Baby Groot before you knew before anyone knew anything about what this character was. I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah, that was really neat. It was a really bad rendering. Like it was like a really tiny early 3D rendering of him, but you could tell what he was going to look like, and that was really neat. But of course, they were like, you can't show this to anybody. You can't even like when you're working on art, you'll see what appears to be a lot of artists posting on Instagram and things where they're showing like insider, like here I am working on the piece. That piece was probably done long enough ago where it feels like they did it today, but usually it's an older piece that they're finally able to show. I felt like that's what I was doing with my Guardians of the Galaxy pieces, because I was drawing him, but knew what he was even gonna like,
It's a
shape
big,
of him.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility for an artist to take on those things. You got to sign a lot of contracts saying you're not going to share that.
Yeah, my Marvel contract was like an inch thick.
This is like a multi-million-dollar surprises basically that Marvel has for these things.
Yeah. And when they send me sample photos and things like renderings of the costumes and stuff, it'll have my name like automatically imposed all over them, so that you can't like put it out there without them knowing who did it. So yeah.
Well, I know there's tons of Marvel people watching our show every week. I just have to say Alex is doing a wonderful job of not telling us anything to an annoying degree. So just keep shoveling him work, because he's keeping the gag in. So what are some current and upcoming projects that you're working on?
Well, I'm talking about doing more covers for Marvel. They're looking at my portfolio and different stuff right now, so I'm talking to different editors. So that's kind of fun. But I haven't got a gig yet on that. But
Okay.
hopefully soon. And then I'm working on my own YouTube channel, which is going to all be about cover design and just the helping out users as other indie people, just helping them out as far as a way to think about covers and try to improve that. So when you're at conventions or when you're putting your stuff into the catalog and it goes into stores like here, that you can actually have an effective cover that actually does all the things you want it to do to create interest so people pick it up, because it's so critical. It's the piece that we all see online. That cover goes really far, and when we do the interiors and the covers, you tend to get to that cover and you're just like, I'll just draw the character. Here it is. And,
Yeah.
and luckily, this is like the Spider-Man. It's just a character, but a lot of times you want a situation that's really important. You want to set the tone of where the story's happening, what other characters are having conflict with the character. All that kind of goes into the design of covers. And so I think we really have to start thinking about that more. And so I'm hoping my channel helps with that.
And right before this show, Andy and Alex were talking about all the comic covers on our comic wall out in the store for about an hour. Like I had to yank them away. Like time to do the show now. Let's talk about this on camera.
Yeah. It plays into what we do. Like every time I feel like I come into the store, we always
Yeah,
talk about
yeah.
what's on.
What's so important when you stand back and look, your eye's going to be drawn somewhere, and it's the cover's job to entice you enough to pick it up and see what's inside.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with, like, if you're doing a Kickstarter project, you want your thumbnail to be really enticing as well. So there's so many times where this information could be usable. So, yeah.
Okay. So, any advice for aspiring comic artists? I mean, you have to be asked that question. You've done an amazing Spider-Man cover.
Yeah.
What's the secret recipe?
Endurance. Endurance.
Yeah, you just put yourself out there and you make your art and you just keep going. Things tend to look wrong to you, and that often is your style, your signature kind of coming through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so just keep going and developing your own look. I think we copy people's looks too often. I think we need to innovate a little bit more, but you have to push yourself and get to a point where you feel confident in order to do that. And I think just going online, showing your work, and just continually output and develop yourself is really the key.
Yeah, I think putting it out there, very rarely is someone, I would say never, they can't see the stuff that's just sitting on your desk that you drew and you're waiting for that phone call. Yeah. You've got to put your work out there. Yeah. You've got to spread it around.
That's really how I connected with Marvel. I had a long period of time when I did those early Spider-Man toy boxes and everything. I did a lot of work early on, and then I kind of took a big hiatus. I went with about 13 years without drawing anything. I was designing and developing interactive material and all sorts of stuff. And then I came back into art and just said, okay, now with, there's less gatekeepers with Kickstarter and things like that, I'll just come in and start making my own books and really developing that. And putting it out online and kind of hyping stuff is where Marvel, an art director at Marvel, eventually found me and started getting me into the licensing side.
So let's go back even further to a question that I think anyone watching could ask themselves too. What started your love of comics in general? I mean, there's so many different ways an artist can go. What began your love affair with comics?
Oh, wow. It's like so many, I think it's really just that those early comics in like stores, they were everywhere when I was really young. I had racks at every grocery store, every convenience store, and I would go up to that all the time. I was with my parents, they would go shopping or picking up groceries, and I would immediately just hang out at the comic rack and flip through and look at stuff. And those early books are just things that got me thinking, and I really enjoyed them. And so many reflected my my toys I had at the time too, like Transformers and Micronauts and all those. And I was picking up that stuff, and it just played into having stories that furthered those toys properties and everything. Yeah, that's really what got me into it early on, and I just loved the storytelling and everything, and just how it all worked. And so now I love to tell stories that way as well now, and it's still a medium that I love, and that's my favorite thing to do is with characters like Spider-Man and everything, is just really create your own version of that. Like, that's the most exciting thing about comics to me, is that you really get to not just do a house style or produce something that looks like that, you come into it and get to do your own version and really put your own like spin on the character. And that's one of the things I love about comics specifically.
That's a good point, because if you look at characters from the Golden Age all the way through, I mean, and think of how many different artists worked on those characters, and then you can see the differences enough that we even have different eras for the characters because they look so different. And that only happens from having that many people work on it, add their own spin until, modern Batman. How much does he look like Golden Age Batman?
Yeah.
Not a whole lot. He doesn't even have the purple gloves.
Yeah, there's just so many takes on it.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, I think we have a fun activity.
We do.
Talking about comic covers.
That is true. So before the show, as I said, they were talking about comic covers for about an hour. We pulled some off the wall. We thought we would just talk about, what we like about them.
Sure.
So let's start. I'll hold them up to the camera. You guys talk about them. So this is the latest issue of Defenders from Marvel. This is issue number 3. I actually just reviewed this yesterday.
I think it's the cover's Javier Rodriguez as well as the interiors. But what strikes you when you see that one?
Limited color palette, which is powerful because it makes things pop. And you have this nice blue tone, and then you have that kind of purpley red there, and it's very limited. If you colored everything individually here and it was all toned differently, it would just kind of be mud, honestly. Like, it wouldn't pop on the shelf. And I think that's one of the most critical things, is just having colors that pop and have contrast. It's really critical.
And that's the thing about your cover too, is you colored it as well. Sometimes when we do covers, they'll supply a colorist or whatever depending on the situation, but for this one you colored it, so you also went with a pretty limited color palette.
Yeah, I tend to go that way in general. That's probably one of the reasons I'm drawn to this cover. But yeah, it's a powerful thing in design as well. Is not creating too much rendering to where it becomes very flat. And photography is the same way. Like, you can shoot very flat photography that doesn't have a lot of highlights and everything, and that can work and it has a mood. But does it look good when it's 1,000 images on a wall? That's tougher.
Yeah, so on our comic wall, we have roughly 150 covers, and it's divided Marvel, DC, Indie. They're all forward-facing like this, and that's how these were selected. Like, they just walked through, and, we all just kind of looked and said, that one, that pops, that one, that draws my eye amongst all of this. So the next one, it's a DC one. Here is Wonder Woman Black and Gold, issue 4.
A whole book that is based off of a limited color palette.
Yeah, that's how popular limited palettes are, right?
But it's funny to think that when you're saying that something that's over-rendered tends to flatten it, because we think of rendering, kind of fleshing out shapes and everything.
Right.
Oh, that adds depth and dimension, but a lot of times that does kind of sink everything kind of together onto the same plane rather than having these stark highlights.
Yeah. And you see this a lot now, is a character on white or on a solid color, and I think this cover really stands out. And it does have a lot of rendering, but with that like completely blank background, the rendering doesn't create too much mud. Like, the character is kind of flat, not a lot of highlights, but that background color just pops.
Yeah, we were looking at several of the white cover ones, and they all stand out because so many covers are sort of dark these days. But this one, more than any of the other ones.
Yeah, and like I said, that creates a mood, and there's nothing wrong with those covers, but their effectiveness at standing out is really limited.
Right. Yeah, if you look at them on their own, it's like, oh wow, but then you look at them with a wall of dark covers,
and it's not that it's like I said, it's not that they don't work. It's that they just aren't. When you are in the sea of all these different images, it's like they're a little harder to notice.
Yeah, you got to think of marketing. Marketing is a big key of cover design.
Yeah.
Here's a darker one that it was one of the ones I actually picked out, the Bermejo Batman cover. And I also, the subject matters, and Batman on a chrome motorcycle that is glistening is just awesome to me. Well,
this is where interesting situation is really what you're responding to, right? It's like him on the motorcycle, and that's what draws you in. And that's one of the powerful things about comics, is you can do that. You can have a giant typewriter where Batman's there and stuff like that. Like you can really play around with the Joker being huge in the background. Like there's a lot of Batman stuff that I think really works because of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's a couple different key things I think with covers. Situation, like having a really strong location set up, like knowing like the genre of the book if they're not familiar with the character. Of course, Batman doesn't really need that unless he's in
He
space.
got that out of the way a
Like
long
could
time
could
ago.
be in space, could be in a maybe back time traveled in the into like back in history or something like that. Like we would need to know that based on the background. But here he's on a motorcycle. It's kind of a modern motorcycle probably, and so he's probably in present day. But he's really just racing down the road or something, and it looks exciting. So
Yeah, covers are like a little snippet of a dream of a story, and since you don't know the story, the person looking at it imagines what it could be.
yeah.
And so, ones like this where it's like right away I look at it and I have 10 different ideas on how cool this could be. That really does something for me.
It's like a really critical moment in the story or something like that.
And there's a big difference between like the regular cover and variant covers. Regular covers tend to reflect something in the story or some elements or a condensed version of a scene. If these two characters appear in it, sometimes you'll see those two characters fighting on a cover or whatever.
That's a classic way, right?
Yeah,
Having
but then
a boxing match type style.
Yeah, but then a variant cover is pretty much fair game. Usually, it's have the character that this book is about, but kind of do whatever you want.
That's what I did. Unfortunately, I didn't know the story when I made this, so yeah, exactly.
All right, so now we have an indie book cover.
Yeah.
Very different color choice. I mentioned how this orange, I never see it unless it's something to do with Halloween or October. And I don't think that's why they selected it. I think that, this was just right for this book.
Yeah. Here again, there's a color toning on the characters that are blue, but then the background is warm, and that contrast level makes this cover pop. The writing, the actual logo design, isn't a high contrast logo. It's actually written over a very bright background, which is kind of unusual and not something you'd want to recommend often. But this one, it kind of works. Like everything's meant to be broken sometimes, right? So yeah.
Then we have another one. So here's one of the ones that Alex picked out. I was interested why you picked this one out.
I've seen this trend a little bit where we're getting like logos across the center. Traditionally, our logos are up top, and that was because for newsstand distribution and everything, reading and flipping and everything, we needed to know what the label of the book was. But here now, modern day, we can swap that around. We can put logos at the bottom, that kind of thing. Here we're getting a logo right across the middle, and it creates a 2-panel separation, which it feels like you're getting a lot more information due to that. And so I've seen this a couple different times over the past couple weeks, and I really like this kind of concept, and I can see this even going further.
And of course, this is the new book, A Righteous Thirst for Vengeance, that just released this week. And then we have one final one, and this was interesting what you had to say about this.
Yeah.
This is Night of the Cadillacs, #1.
When you're talking about photography, and when you think about that, like when you shoot like people standing there, a lot of times the eye line, they're either looking off camera or they're looking directly at the viewer. And when you make eye contact with somebody, our bodies react, our mind reacts. We feel a connection to that person. And this cover does that. This cover has a very straight on look to the viewer and a very serious look, which it can create like a really strong feeling and reaction, which I think makes it pop the same way as bright colors do.
Yeah, after you mentioned this, before we started recording, I was walking along the comic wall looking for what eyes were looking at me. And it really wasn't a lot. Yeah, most of the characters were looking somewhere else, or even if they were looking straight, I think you said it, Andy, there's looking straight, but there's also like looking at you.
Yeah, there's a difference that you can kind of tell some that are looking straight, but they're kind of in the scene that they're in looking forward, but then there's some that are very like portrait-like, that are the eyes are deliberately focused at wherever the reader is going to be.
Yeah. There's just a natural connection with when you stare through somebody, it doesn't feel like you're like looking at them, like you're off in your own head or something like that. Yeah.
All right, well, cool. Well, awesome. Well, we're glad that we could get you on the show, do this little special. Congratulations, like really, really congratulations, getting to do a cover for Amazing Spider-Man. I remember when you told us how excited I got. I was like, wow, I might be almost excited as you are, and you're the person that made it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
so,
it's really great. This is an amazing day. I can't wait to keep going out and talking about this cover with
yep,
people.
because in an hour and a half, you're going to be doing a signing here,
Yeah.
or you'll be signing for hopefully lots and lots of people, making them happy. And hopefully, this will be the first cover that you do of possibly many.
Yeah, well, you're gonna
That's the
have
goal.
your own variant cover month, like a lot of artists get. And then you'll be
Wouldn't that
like,
be great?
I'm really tired of having to do so many of these.
Oh,
I don't know if that could
that's
ever
such
happen for an
such
artist.
a burden.
But another Spider-Man.
All right, well, Alex, when you get your YouTube channel up, let us know. We would love to plug it. I mean, I just want to check it out as well, as much as we all talk about covers. One more opportunity to see it done by somebody who clearly knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Who's getting to do Amazing Spider-Man covers and all. So, all right, well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And
Good
thank
to be
you all
here.
for watching. And have a great rest of your day.